So what happens to the money in your TFSA account when you pass away? And do you have control over that? This is the next video in my 10-part TFSA series. Hi, I'm Annie. This is Annie Unleashed. Welcome to the community where we make money strategies and concepts easy to understand and relatable. Today we're going to talk about 5 things. How you name somebody on your TFSA so you get to control where the money goes. What happens if you don't? The difference between a successor holder and a beneficiary, and what happens to the contribution room of your TFSA and how it's affected tax-wise. So let's get into it. When you first open your TFSA account, it asks you, do you want to name a beneficiary or a successor holder? These are the only 2 ways where you can name somebody specifically on your TFSA account, no matter where that TFSA account is held. Once you name somebody, then the financial institution knows that when you pass on, when you die, then that money should go to that person. Now, the terms of that, whether it's successor holder or beneficiary, I'm going to dive into in a couple minutes. So essentially, if you want to control where your money goes in your TFSA account, then it's best to name a beneficiary or a successor holder. What happens if you don't name anybody specifically on your TFSA account? Well, then the financial institution assumes that it has to go through your will and through the estate. So they will wait until someone with legal authority, an executor of a will, gets in touch with them to provide all the proper paperwork and the instructions so that the financial institution or the advisor that's named on that account knows how to process the money in that TFSA. However, that does leave the TFSA accounts subject to potential battles in court. And if it goes through your will or through the estate, it means that everything is fully taxable from that TFSA account. So let's talk about a way where it's not taxable. That would be by naming a successor holder. Now, the only person you can name as a successor holder is your spouse or common law partner. That's the only way that the money from your TFSA account can transfer over to your partner or spouse, a named specific person, as successor holder easily and quickly, because the financial institution already has that directive. They've already been told on your TFSA forms that this is the person that's your spouse or common law partner, and that the money should directly flow to their TFSA account. Now, when that happens and your money from your TFSA account moves over to your spouse's TFSA account, there is no tax penalty. It goes right through, and it's not affected by their TFSA contribution room. So it literally just passes right through. In fact, it's considered an open account. Therefore, it hasn't been closed. It doesn't go to the deceased estate. It goes directly from the TFSA that it was to your spouse's TFSA. Easy peasy. If you live in the province of Quebec, the status of successor holder is not recognized, but there are still ways that the spouse can benefit from the tax-exempt contributions. Now let's talk about when you name a beneficiary instead of a successor holder on your TFSA account. Now, a beneficiary has some areas of flexibility, but it does work a bit differently. A beneficiary can be a spouse or common law partner, but could also be any family member, child, really any person. Most people do family, someone in their family. It could be a charitable organization as well. When a beneficiary is named on the TFSA account, it is considered closed, meaning that the TFSA account that belonged to the deceased TFSA holder is now considered closed, and therefore there are some tax situations that get activated. The difference between a successor holder and a beneficiary, and what happens to the contribution room and how it's affected tax-wise. Successor holder. So let's talk about how this affects contribution room of the spouse receiving the TFSA from their now deceased spouse. When the move is made, like I said, the account is still considered open. Therefore, it was never closed. Therefore, the deceased person never received it through their estate, and it goes seamlessly from the one spouse to the other. Now, contribution-wise, This doesn't affect the surviving spouse at all. It doesn't affect their contribution room. They can continue to make contributions to their TFSA based on their own contribution room and limits. Also, it's good to remember that they don't gain the contribution room of their deceased spouse. So you always have your own TFSA contribution room that's managed only for you. So it's individual based. So you don't inherit your spouse's contribution room. It's also helpful to point out that any transfers where you're trying to consolidate or bring together TFSA accounts, so if you have 2 or more TFSA accounts at different institutions and you want to bring them all together, those count as transfers. So you're just consolidating them together. That also doesn't affect your contribution room. When the TFSA passes to the spouse as a successor holder, it's the issuer, so the financial institution that holds your TFSA account, they're the ones that inform CRA of the change in status. Once your spouse has received the proceeds of the TFSA from the now deceased spouse, they can now make changes to the beneficiary because it's all now part of their TFSA account. So that's something to know and to keep in mind. A benefit of naming a successor holder is that not only do the funds transfer seamlessly into the surviving spouse's TFSA, but any income earned in that TFSA also benefits from tax exempt status. So any income earned within the account is also not taxed if it moves over to the spouse as a successor holder. When a beneficiary is named on the TFSA account, there are some tax situations that get activated. So if it gets moved over to a spouse, no biggie, it still goes over seamlessly and it doesn't affect their contribution room. But if the beneficiary was anybody other than the spouse or common law partner, then it does trigger a tax event, meaning that anything that was in that TFSA account is now fully taxable, and then anything left after that goes to whoever was named as beneficiary. Now, if you're a non-resident of Canada and you've been named as a TFSA beneficiary, then you may not be tax exempt either from receiving the TFSA funds. If you name the beneficiary of your TFSA account as estate, meaning you haven't decided on a particular person or a charitable organization that you'd like your TFSA account to go to, you just name estate, it's the same as not naming anyone at all. It's still going to be fully taxable. It's still going to have to go through the legal process before it lands on who it goes to via the will. So if you have a will and you've named within your will how you would like your assets, your money, and other things to be distributed, to be spread out between the people that survive you, then that's the process it'll go through. So whether you name an estate or you don't name anybody, it's the same thing because the default is estate. So if there's no named beneficiary or successor holder, then the default automatically becomes your estate. Now, if you're the beneficiary that receives the TFSA funds, then you can contribute all or part of what you receive to your TFSA, but it does depend and is limited by your contribution room. Only a spouse is able to move funds from the deceased TFSA holder into their own without it impacting their contribution room. When someone passes away and the beneficiary is anybody other than their spouse, it creates a date stamp for the financial institution, meaning that once they have the death certificate, they know the date of death. That's important because the value of your TFSA on that day is frozen in place. And no matter when they get that information, they backdate it to that day's value for the TFSA. That way, they know what was the value of the TFSA account on that date, the date of death, and that's what they distribute according to the instructions that they receive. Any earnings within the TFSA account are taxable after the date of death if you have a beneficiary. That's not the spouse. Now, I want to just talk about if you do name a charitable organization as the beneficiary of your TFSA. Now, some people will do this as one of their final wishes. Now, this contribution has to be done within 36 months of the date of death. Whoever is enacting your will has to make sure that that instruction to contribute from your TFSA account to that charitable organization, it has to be done within 36 months following the date of death. Now, what most people don't realize is that, we do our taxes year after year, but there is one final tax return that's done when somebody passes away. And the executor of your will is responsible for making sure that there's one final tax return. So if you named a charitable organization as the beneficiary of your TFSA, then the executor of your will does have to request the change from CRA so that that donation gets counted as a charitable donation tax credit on your final tax return. This is helpful because it means that you pay less tax as the estate and you have more funds to go to the people that you want it to go to, the people that you care about, that people that survive you and that could benefit from an inflow of cash. I hope you found this video helpful in terms of what happens to your TFSA money when you pass away, and who gets it and how you get to control it, and what are some of the considerations around contribution room and tax impacts. If you are interested in my free investment flow guide, it's something I've put together. It's fun and also practical based on my 20+ years experience helping thousands of people and coaching hundreds of advisors over the years, and the patterns that I see around money and saving and investing. There are 4 profiles, and I talk about potential platforms that might work best for you based on how you need to invest, an affirmation or 2, some do's and don'ts that will help you as well. And you may find that you really lean towards one profile out of the 4, but you may also be a combination of 1 or 2. So enjoy. There's a link to download the free investment flow guide in the description box. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get notified as soon as my next video is up. Take care. See you in the next one.